Hello and welcome to She Leads Collective podcast. I'm Mary Gregory and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about what it really means to lead as a woman today and how we can all show up with more courage, care and clarity. You'll hear from inspiring women, powerful allies and bold truth tellers who are changing the game, not by playing tougher, but by leading smarter, softer and stronger. Hello and welcome to today's episode. What if the most powerful form of intelligence today isn't artificial, but authentic? In a world where AI is automating the ordinary, how do we ensure the extraordinary doesn't go unseen? Too often, brilliant women lead from the shadows, driving change, creating impact, but staying invisible. My guest today is on a mission to change all that. Nishma Patel Robb is a definitive positive force. With over a decade at Google, shaping brand and reputation strategy, President of Women in Advertising and Communications Leadership, now in its 101st year, and now the founder of Glittersphere, a movement where TED Talk meets Studio 54, she is rewriting the rules of visibility, voice and leadership for women. Nishma has built influence from boardrooms to global stages, championing the other AI, authentic intelligence, and helping women transform quiet expertise into undeniable presence. I'm also proud to say I'm a founding member of Glittersphere, and I've experienced firsthand how powerful Nishma's mission is. So get ready to explore personal brand, reinvention, and how to build an unapologetic, unmissable presence in a noisy world. Nishma, thank you so much for being here and a warm welcome to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And also, thank you for being one of the founding members. You are one of the original Glitterati. So very excited to be here.
Well, I do love a bit of glitter. So although I'm not wearing any today, you are. I might let our listeners know. You always turn up in glitter. I have got quite a bit of glitter in my wardrobe, which at some point I will show up to one of your events in.
Yes, good. I can't wait.
Okay, so I'm going to start off and I'm going to get quite personal straight away because I'm always curious about what motivates my guests. So for me, you come across as a wonderful mix of warmth and strength, a bit of cheeky quirkiness and lots of glitter and sparkle. Tell me a bit about what has influenced and shaped you to be who you are today.
Wow, what a lovely question. And also, thank you so much for what your observations of me are. It's always that kind of curious thing, isn't it? How others see you. So I think for me, it's interesting. My influences are, I come from a mix of cultures. So British born, born in Watford. I'm the youngest of three girls. My parents originate from India. And so I have this rich kind of South Asian and British cultural mix of probably often feel more British than anything else. But also my parents were quite creative in terms of their original kind of pursuits of careers. And so I grew up as a little girl, as the youngest of three, but in an environment where we loved disco music. My earliest memories were actually dancing next to a speaker that was as tall as me to Donna Summer that my dad used to play.
Oh, fabulous.
And my dad at the time had he had a business at the time, which was like a fashion boutique, 1970s fashion boutique in Wardour Street, right? So you couldn't get more kind of, I suppose, culturally relevant at the time. And so I suppose those early things were real formers of perhaps that sense of creativity and expression and that, which really embedded into me. And I think also that sense of possibility. So my parents actually had come from quite creative trades, from very, very, very humble beginnings. We had a very humble life and quite challenging childhood at times in terms of, I suppose, opportunity. But the over thing is humour was a big part of life. My dad was a real character, has a real kind of big sense of humour, and through adversity and challenge, he was always the one to kind of still smile and joke, and great charm. This sense of creativity, they were making, whether it's entrepreneurial or literally creativity from graphical and ads and kind of arts and culture in that sense, music being a bit part of it, and that sense of possibility. And I think that's what's kind of shaped me, because life is never linear. There are always many challenges that we're faced. And I think personally, whether it was through not necessarily felt like I belonged anywhere and being comfortable with being a happy outsider and seeing the opportunity, that serendipity of meeting people and being actually endlessly more curious because you're not formed into one little space, probably has always made me the natural rebel, but has definitely fueled creativity and curiosity and a sense of fairness. I think, grew up with a sense of fairness. It's probably my greatest value. It comes and goes in all sorts of different ways, but I am, a dreamer. I'm ambitious, and fairness is a big part of it. But I think that sense of, I don't mean not taking yourself seriously in the way it should be, but actually not taking yourself too seriously, like doing it with humour. When I reflect back on leadership over my 30-year corporate career, people would often talk about one of the distinctive parts of my leadership was that I led often with humour, you know, tackling different things, showing that softer side, as you say, that like we can have fun doing this, still achieve great things. So those are the things I think really formatively either kind of inspired me creatively, inspired me from a leadership sense of view, but also that striving for opportunity. When I was a little girl, I really wanted to be a television presenter. I was always a storyteller. My mum would literally try and send me off to people to kind of like go and talk to so-and-so, like to stop distracting, because I'd want to sit and tell everyone a story. I'm still like that now. But particularly the little girl, and family friends would say, gosh, you could sit and talk to Nishma forever. She'd always got a story. 5 years old, and I'd pop up with a story. And so even now when I'm, my friends will joke and go, Nishma's got great stories. And I think those are the things that I had in my head was like, well, anything's possible. I want to be a TV presenter, because at that time that was the thing that meant you could tell stories. And I was often told no. And it's interesting how I only now can reflect on this, how I dealt with all those no's, whether it was a teacher going, no one like you on TV, or even, distant family friends. It wasn't so much me, but other families who would go, oh, well, no, that's not somewhere for you. And even my mum and dad, in a sense of protecting me, were always kind of shuffling me to go, well, don't do that, do this. This is a safer, more secure future. But it's interesting because those things of that lack of representation undoubtedly shaped my attitude. I was a real magazine junkie as a little girl, read endlessly glossy magazines and would dream of this fashion future. And actually had even my first kind of jobs, I hand wrote, pre-digital, hand wrote letters to all of the magazines just to get an internship, to get experience to sit outside. And I remember at 7, after having written 200 letters, so 100 letters the first time, didn't get an answer, I wrote another 100 letters and eventually got an internship, Marie Claire magazine, 89, 90, whatever it might have been. So it was at its height of the thing. And I got invited in to
Oh,
have an
fabulous.
internship for the summer on the features department. And I'd never been in a corporate environment. As this little girl lived in this kind of almost other world, who hasn't been surrounded by lots of professional women or anyone who worked in the kind of media sense. And all of a sudden I find myself in the offices of Marie Claire magazine in Knightsbridge, never having been in there, complete fish out of water, terrified, but also excited. And it was, everything that you could imagine, from Devil Wears Prada to anything else.
Sounds
Well, it's
amazing.
amazing. But I actually ended up getting shuffled off to IPC Magazine's library, to research a story about male gold diggers, which was fascinating at the age of 17, sitting there. And I thought it was my dream job, poring over these magazines, learning about male gold diggers. And I loved it for a bit, but actually what I realised is I found it quite quiet and isolating. So I used to love coming back into the office, and I was always peering around to go, they look like they're having fun. But I think those things meant that what I kept seeing was these kind of juxtapositions of either not being represented or seen, or not being able to quite access these spaces. And I think, interestingly, as that's carried through my career, never as a chip on my shoulder, but as a determination, that sense of fairness, and that's where it came from. And so perhaps I'm not in the first 20 years of working, when you're a bit head down and really struggling to just, I suppose, get on. And I was very successful, very gratefully to be very successful in my career. But I think attitude was a big part of that, as well as ability and focus, and a bit of that kind of bold and brave. And I think if you've had a slightly tougher upbringing and had, society or otherwise, real challenges to embrace, it makes you incredibly resilient in the workplace. But I think I hit a point probably when I first went to Google, maybe a bit before that, where I realised I had an opportunity to maybe change what was happening from a representation point of view. And I started to work on a project, which was the real first eye-opener for me, working with the Geena Davis Institute. And, so if I think of this kind of mixed bag of like sparkle and disco and ambition and dreamer and storytelling, and it served me incredibly well in my career today. I remember finding myself, I was a newish mum to my twins. The twins were maybe about 4 years old. And I was back at work, and I'd landed this amazing dream job at Google. And I was sat in this room with Geena Davis, which was like Thelma and Louise, So I was one of those kind of 90s girls that had grown up on Geena Davis. And she created this institute, was to challenge representation of women in film. And I'd create the Bechdel test, which was like, at what point does a woman speak? What does she say? Anyway, so I'm in this room with her and she's presenting some research. And one of the things that absolutely floored me, and I think was a real turning point for me in terms of focus for how I wanted my career to, or energy to go, but she shared this piece of research about the influence of media on our younger selves, on children, in fact, and how that then carries through and extrapolates out. And as a mum to, little kids and lots of children's TV in our house, Disney princess movies and all the rest of it, couldn't believe when she showed me this research about the strong bias that was already bedded into children's TV that was forming these thoughts and behaviours that was then evolving over. And it was a combination of her and the realisation of things like over-sexualised images of the way that even cartoon characters of little girls were, or why did the princess always have to be saved by a prince? And all those things that made you stop and go, why have I never noticed this before? And it was a real moment to me. I've never noticed this before.
That's the power of bias, though, isn't it? That because it's
Yeah.
unconscious, it's so embedded in our society, isn't
Well,
it?
that's the thing. I think that was the thing that was a bit of a shock to the system to go, wow. And then it was the realization I started to work with someone about books. And again, it was like, wow, in literature, where are they? And it made me stop and start to question lots of things, my own identity, what was being kind of served to the world, what was the impact of that. I then met Miriam Gonzalez, who is, obviously phenomenal in her own right. And one of the greatest kind of, I think, European, not just human rights, but kind of legal rights. And I never liked to say she was Nick Clegg's wife, because I always used to say Nick Clegg was her husband. That she had this program called Basically in Support of Girls, and she was really passionate about education of careers for girls. I demonstrating anything was possible because she could see the impact, despite being a mum to 3 boys, etc. She had this great passion. I happened to get invited to something to speak at a school in East London by her, and it's just standing there and listening again to the research and the impact was happening. I think the combination of those things happening in a very short space of time, I think genuinely did kind of shift me to a point of going, maybe it's being a mother as well, and maybe it's age, early 40s point. And I thought, I want to do something about this. And I found ways to weave that into my day job because I just wanted to find a way to go, how can I make the world a bit fairer? I just want to be seen. I want my kids to be seen, and I don't want this to kill any more dreams. And I was fortunate to work with lots of YouTubers and younger people, and I could see shifts happening. So I think for me, it was this, if I kind of go disco to now, it was this weird kind of journey of discovery that I love, but I haven't probably reflected on as much as I could have done until the last few years.
Incredible journey, and I get such a strength and determination in that journey, mixed with the glitter and the humour. I can now totally get where the glitter comes from in terms of your upbringing and what happened at home as well. Just wonderful. And your meeting with Geena sounds like it was a turning point moment for you that actually opened your
As you
eyes.
say, it's bias, right? For me, I had experienced firsthand racism, prejudice, bias, when I was younger, quite horrifically so. I'd probably kind of like brushed a lot of it off as I'd moved through my adult years and early career. Definitely integrated well generally into society, and that's probably more my personality and relationship building skills. But certainly was aware of it. It wasn't like I didn't know because I'd been firsthand. So when I sat in that room and listened to that research and thought about all the subliminal impact of media and content, and someone who really loved working in media and technology and was a big part of everything I did was, marketing campaigns and telling stories. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my goodness, hold on, but the stories we're telling are having such a huge and significant impact. I think it was that realization, it was that point that made me go, actually there's more I can do about this. And I think it's that sense of agency. And I always talk about this with people, partly because inspired by the leaders, but my own actions as well, is that everyone plays a role in what we do. It doesn't matter how little you think it is. If we all just took a little action, things would be different. And I think that was, for me, gave me agency. I never really thought I had any agency to go, I can do something. And that definitely set me off on a path, both in shaping my career at Google and the success I had there and the impact I had, and being really creative about the way that I delivered it, at times really blunt and trying to drive it, and then having to be really smart and strategic about, okay, there's another way. I've got to go around the houses in this way to make things happen.
I am curious about being a woman leader at somewhere like Google because, the tech world is renowned for being short on women leaders. So you are a real role model of someone who has been successful in that space. Could you share a bit more about what it was like actually working and making your way in such a modern leading edge
So it's one
organization?
of those things, I'd worked for 20 years before I'd got to Google. So, and I had experienced a lot of that time at the top on my own. My first really senior board appointment was when I worked for Teletext, and we were owned by the Daily Mail Group. And so I had a period of time where I actually worked on the operating board. I was invited on there by Lord Rothermere to be that. And I was the only woman, the youngest by some measure, and the only person of colour. And so that sense of isolation, of being on my own, had been something that had been a big part of my 20 years of career. It was always getting better, thankfully, as things started to change. But there was a lot of time you'd look left and right, and there was nobody else really that was like me. So when I came to Google, there were a lot of other female leaders in the non-engineering piece, which is obviously where I was in marketing, but not necessarily always at the top. So when I joined, again, joining in at that operating board level, there were other senior women in other parts of the organisation, but in that kind of UK leadership of the kind of sales, revenue, commercial, non-engineering part of the business, I joined at the time when a new UK leader was coming in as well from America, who was a woman, the first female leader for the business in the UK. And I happened to arrive at the same time, and we arrived both in. She very, very experienced, very senior. I was coming in, really struck by imposter syndrome, a bit of fear. And it was interesting because I remember in the first few weeks thinking, oh my God, what am I doing here? Because for me, it had too many echoes of what I'd seen in the past. And I felt really frustrated by that, to go, I don't want to be in that room anymore. I'd intentionally left rooms where I always remember, being in spaces where they didn't have the wisdom to listen to anyone else. And therefore I didn't want to be there. And it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want to listen to anyone else. It was just an interesting conditioning. And what I observed her do in that first period of time, again, is why I stayed and wanted to be the leader I become to be, is she commanded that room almost like a conductor. The way she would stop someone from speaking, the way she introduced people in, and she did it. And she focused on that initial stage of going, how does she make us a team to see each other and connect? And it was just brilliant to have a front row seat on watching a leader like her, Eileen Norton, absolutely phenomenal leader. She'd previously been like president of Time magazine and come to Google, worked for Google for many years. After she left the UK, she went and actually ran all the people operations. She's since left. But she was an incredible leader to watch and observe. But she was one who gave me real strength about going, actually, you can be a woman leader in this. And actually, by being a woman leader, so she was very feminine in some ways, but my God, she had the most incredible strength. But we both bonded over our love of fashion and our love of culture and the theatre and whatever. So she was a woman's woman, right? She wasn't someone who I'd worked with many other women in the past, so I couldn't relate to. She was someone I directly related to. And yet she commanded the room and the business with such authority and grace.
And she gave the team psychological safety and getting the team together.
Exactly.
She prioritized that by the sounds of
That is the
it.
first thing she did coming in, which would be rare in a business like that. So that was really
Yes,
interesting to watch how somebody like her would command those kind of very strong alpha males. They were all silverbacks in that room, and it was difficult to be in. But she changed it. Within 6 months, she changed the environment. But I always
incredible.
remember there was a moment, probably 4 months or so in, and we've got this away day together and building the team. And I was really struggling initially, and I joined to find my voice, be confident. I felt really out of place. And as you can imagine, somewhere like Google has some of the best talent in the world. So it was quite intimidating to be in. And I'd gone into the ladies' loo, and I was washing my hands, and I'd been quite quiet in the meetings. And she just said to me, "You need to speak up." And I was like, and she was quite firm. We were always very soft, but she turned around to me and she went, "You have got to start believing yourself, Nishma. I need your voice in there, and you've got to start saying, because what you say has so much value. So you've got to stop doing this thing." And she just called it out exactly what I was feeling when she said, "I know what you're doing. You're saying the question in your head, or you're saying the thought in your head, and you're not saying it out loud. I'm going to make you do it." And she actually made me feel quite scared, but in a lovely way. And I was like, shit, I've got to go out and do it. And there was a sense of like, she believes in me, so I've got to do it. But also a sense of I didn't want to let her down. And after that, I remember going in and starting to find my voice, and like being a bit shocked when everyone wanted to sit and listen to me, or going, "Oh, actually, I really agree with what Nish was doing." And it built from there. And that's why I suppose why I so passionately care now about this sense of finding your voice, finding your strength, being visible. Because that's what she did for me. Is I was in that room, but I wasn't visible. So what was the point in being in the room if I wasn't visible? The attendance and appearance was nothing. Her dragging me out the shadows to go, use your voice, say what you think, be present, be visible, that changed everything. I then became this super visible leader and was really passionate about actually being comfortable with my style and my way of doing things while listening and learning. So I learned a lot from her.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that, well, it resonates with me for a start. Not so much now, but when I was younger, I certainly can remember sitting in board meetings thinking, why are they doing this? And what's the purpose of this conversation right now? And not voicing it and having that encouragement. And I know that many of the women on my courses, I run leadership development courses for women, particularly those that may be a bit more junior, are struggling with that very thing of editing what they're about to say. So whoever's listening, I really encourage you to take on what you've just shared there, Nishma, because it makes such a difference to just say
Yeah.
it, get your voice out there in whatever way you can, because it does transform how you'll be seen and
Yeah.
also making the difference you
It's
want to make.
practice. That's what I learned. Actually, I say to people, if you one of the easiest ways you want to start building your visibility in an organization, or even you go to a networking event, it sometimes can be quite hard. Put your hand up. Stick your hand up. And it's terrifying first time you do it. But I tell you what, the 10th or 11th time you've done it, it gets easier. But you've got to get that training ground in.
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice I was received once was from a senior leader at Tesco, who she was the first woman to be on the board. She said, the thing you want to do is make sure you get your voice out in every meeting. And even if you just ask a question, asking a question gets your voice in the room, and that's what's important. So always make sure you ask a question, if nothing else, before you leave that space. Excellent. And it's so resonant, what you've just shared there. Really, really great. Can you then bring us to present day and tell us about the origin of the Glittersphere?
So, as I said, I'd had a long and very successful corporate career. I'd tried my hand at different things. I felt like I'd reinvented myself multiple times over, and I was coming up to the 10-year mark at Google, and also was turning 50 around that time as well. And I don't know, I think it's a number of things, and I read and thought a lot about it. There's, I think, definitely a sense of mortality. How many more years, what I do, and I think 50 is one of those milestones in a career sense. It makes you go, am I going to work for another 10, 15 years? And what am I going to do with that time? And I remember sitting in a meeting actually, and someone was being introduced, or we were referring to someone, and they'd been at the business for sort of 16 years. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know if I want to be that person. And if I don't move now, I am going to be that person. I'm going to stay here for another 5, 6 years. And there was just genuinely a sense of misalignment that I felt. And that's why I always say to people, reinvention is not about necessarily changing who you are. I think it's about, for me certainly, and for a lot of people I work with, it's about being more of you. And I was enjoying becoming more of me. And there was definitely bits of me that I felt I still wasn't being. And there was a sense of like, well, how do I do that? And the reality in any job is there are things that you love doing. And I love the storytelling. I love the creativity. I loved being on stage and doing the talking. I was brilliant at relationship building and creating experiences and all of that stuff that I loved doing in my job. And like with any job, there are bits that you less love. And as you become more senior, unfortunately, you end up doing some more of the less stuff that you love, and more of that and less of the other. But also there's an alignment, as will often happen. The business needs to focus on these things, and I wanted to focus on here. And I felt that I hadn't made enough progress on the mission that Geena Davis spark had given to me. And it was, post 2020, we've been through the pandemic, you have more time at home, you're stuck. And I was having a bit of a big reevaluation of my life. And part of that reevaluation was definitely a sense of legacy. It's a bit of a going, well, what have I done? I was always, I think, maybe slightly stressed in the pandemic when, Google was an intense place to be at that time, wonderfully supportive from an employment view. Shifting to working from home wasn't as difficult because we were slightly, already comfortable with a video conferencing environment because of being a global business. But there were other things that were really, really challenging. I definitely get my energy from being around people. So I found these moments hard, but also a sense of going, what's my contribution? When I'm older, if I'm lucky enough to have some grandchildren and they turn around to me and go, Mummy, what did you do in the time of the pandemic? I was thinking, well, I don't want them to say, well, I wrote some slide decks and I did some spreadsheets. And I knew what I was doing was more than that. But I had a sense of going, is this it? And without wanting to seem ungrateful, because I had a wonderful job, there was definitely a bit of an internal feel. And my observation became more and more clearer that I was seeing not just myself diminishing my own voice, and not that was a visible way to anyone else, but was I being true to who I wanted to be? So I was perhaps editing myself rather than censoring. It was more self-edit, or feeling like I had to be edited, or feeling like I couldn't say quite what I wanted to say. And then also thinking, there are lots of very committed, brilliant people trying to make change and equality in the world. Why are we not seeing more of it? And I think, this was pre the rollback of the DEI, but you could have predicted that. I think if people who'd worked deeply in DEI would have predicted that there was going to be a shift back. You could just see it. And so I think there was two things that happened. Once was this sense of going, I just want to do more of the things I love doing. I know I've got these superpowers. It's taken me 30 odd years of working to openly go, I can do
Yes.
this. And I was president of WACL at the time as well, and could see the power of being able to help other women. I'd always done it, worked with startups, worked with women, led women at Google, these things. But it wasn't my full-time job. And I had this sense of going, what if I did things differently? What if I go and create the place that I never existed for me? And started to dream these things. I always say to people, it was never a sliding doors moment. It's a bit of a gradual slide to that moment where you change. And a friend of mine had said, write a career bucket list because you feel really stuck, Nish. You've got to go off and do some dreaming. And I was like, well, I wrote this career bucket list. And on there, I looked at this list and was like, I can't do any of these things where I am because I want to go off and do it. And am I going to be comfortable with 80-year-old Nishma looking back at this list and going, well, you could have done it, but you didn't because you stayed in a safe job. So I decided to hell with it. I decided to leave my very safe job at the height of AI and complete madness, really, when I sometimes think about it, to go off and pursue this because the call for what I wanted to do was more exciting. And the call, in the really simple, ambitious terms, was I wanted to believe, as someone who believes in stories, the stories could change the world. And I wanted to hear more stories of women. I wanted to hear the stories that I wasn't finding, my story plus many others. When I was in the process of separating from my husband, who'd been together for 20 years, and it was an amicable separation and even leaving a job, when I went out to look for those stories to help guide me through that period of time, there simply weren't enough. And that was not because I didn't believe they didn't exist. It's because they weren't being told. Hence the birth of the Glittersphere, which for me was going, if I can create an environment and a community that will help women to find and discover their story inside of them and help them to tell it, get on a stage and tell it, that's what I want to do. And the Glittersphere was, I love music and I love sparkle. And I had this belief in this kind of a summer holiday with my kids. And I was thinking, what am I going to name the business? And kind of went back to my roots. And there's something beautiful about a glitter ball because of the way it, throws out light. And I'm a big believer of together we are a light source, but individually we are a light source. Together we're a really bright light source. And also the fact that light gets thrown in unpredictable ways. And so there was the combination of this sense of this metaphor of this disco ball and light being thrown and shining brightly and being kind of enormous and that. And then also this sense of having gone to Ibiza for my 50th, lots of friends, and just I love dancing and whatever, and just recognizing this bit where on a dance floor, I think it's the most democratic space in the world, that we can rub shoulders up with each other. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a banker or you could be this or whatever your situation is. You're just the same. You're enjoying yourself and expressing yourself. And so that was the combination behind the name, but also a lot of the concept to go, can I create a space that's truly democratic, that all sorts of different types of women would want to be part of, with a single mission of that we are supporting each other to be visible and brilliant. And that's kind of there. I also think I came out of Google and started to build the Glittersphere without a complete plan. And I've always been really honest about this. So I started 2025 with I'm going to launch this, and without a full, and had an amazing, huge wait list and interest, which was amazing. Great. Okay, this is a thing. What is the thing? And people would ask me, and I'm like, well, I'm still figuring it out, because there wasn't a playbook to follow. Like I said, if I'm going to do this differently, I've got to figure out what it is. So I took lots of research and input, constantly asked people, what do they want? And started to dabble and try things. And we're still in the building phase. There's still so much more to come. But I've been really open about sharing my journey of the trials and tribulations and the joy of starting a business, because it's not easy.
Well, that's what I love about your posts, actually, is they are sometimes they're really raw, and it's like, oh, but God, I know what she's talking about, because we've all been there. And on social media can over glamorize and polish things too much. And you're being in integrity by living the realness of it all. There are times it just feels like
I agree with
shit.
that kind of the perfected image. And look, we've grown up in an era where it was, Melanie Griffiths in Working Girl, 9 to 5, put your trainers on, and that's what you did it all, and you were grateful for it. The reality is it's way harder. The bumps and, turns and the joy of building something or having a career is different.
Well, I need to ask you, because you have chosen the road less traveled, because you've left a very safe environment. I mean, what is security? What is safety? But that you got a paycheck at the end of the month. You were in the structure of the job at Google and all that sort of stuff. You've also left your husband as well. And I know you said that as amicable, which is fine, but it's still two big endings
Oh, huge.
altogether. What I get a sense of is your purpose, your mission is really driving you. But how have you managed the anxiety, the fear? Because a lot
Mm.
of women who want to step out avoid stepping out? Because it just is, the fear is just too
I
overwhelming.
think fear is the greatest enemy that we face really at the moment, particularly as women, but for anyone kind of seeking change. And yet we live in the most unpredictable world, more so than ever before, with great uncertainty and challenge around us. And so for me, I mean, I think there's things that I can reflect on that I didn't do well that I've now can teach others about it or share my experience with others. Was there is without a doubt you grieve an identity. For me, I felt that I was shedding skin and off building a new identity, and that's a really great positive space to be in. But actually, emotionally, you are putting to bed two identities or multiple identities, and I don't think I'd given myself enough time to grieve that at times, which kind of came back and hit me back. So there was either points of kind of reconfirming my belief. When not long after I announced that I was leaving Google, I got offered a job that would have been my dream job. There's no doubt about it. And there's a slight frustration again. Oh God, if I'd arrived at some other point, I'd have jumped at it. And it was a real test of like, do I really want to follow what I'm doing? And it really agonized over this decision. And I decided to not do it. And there have been many times that I've kind of gone, God, was that the right decision? But I felt something in my heart that goes, no. And I felt good about that. And that helps sometimes in the moments of fear to keep coming back to that. No, I'm trusting something that's going to take time and do it. And I'm not a patient person. So it's been a big lesson. But then also grieving in a positive way the life that I had and the identity I have, and marrying that with the new. So it wasn't ignoring it, it's acknowledging it. And I think those kind of bits are important. I think the other aspects of fear, and fear comes in stages, and I still have anxiety, right? I still worry about there's no regular paycheck. There is, you want to take time off and have holiday. I found the summer holidays, I'm finding it really hard. I've had a little bit of time off with my family, with my parents, who are, very grateful to still have, octogenarians, and it's not quite a rest, right? But it's time together. And that's difficult when you run your own business. So I still have anxiety, I still have fear. There's no complete sentence or ending here. But the way I process it is I think it's coming back to that mission and vision regularly. This is why I'm doing it. Remind myself why I'm doing it. I also have learned so much to just live in the now, like not go, those were the good old days, or those are the best times of my life, or that's coming there, or that's there. Actually, do you know what? Right here and now, this is the best time of my life. And really appreciating that, like not just saying, but actually like saying it every day to myself and living it and believing it and treating each day, each moment like a moment like this moment will never happen for me again. We'll meet again, but this conversation and evolving won't happen again. And just seeing the beauty in that everything is a first, and firsts make us excited. So I do that. And then I think the other part of fear is like, what are the few things that you can create as things that you can hold on to? Because you've got to have some bits of safety. So there are some things I do, and I started to do, which are bits of jobs, consultancy, that became my kind of anchors of like, that's safe. Having a number of mentors that would keep me accountable. So you have ones that just, pat on the back and it's great and it's praise, but there's ones who give you the hard time to go, get it done, I want to see it by next week. And that helps. And then I think the other thing is going, how lucky I am to be designing a life. Because I think when you say you're designing a life, you take agency and control. That helps suppress fear, because fear comes more from a sense of lack of control and uncertainty. So de-risk it by telling yourself you've got control, and recognize that I am designing a life I want to live. And therefore things are kind of going to go wrong or right with it. But it keeps me really open and curious and open to serendipity. And so one of the things, as I've been building Glittersphere, is, which is kind of madness sometimes when I think about how overwhelmed I feel at times, is I've launched another business with two co-founders, which is lovely, because Glittersphere is just me, the Hero, the other business is for them. And that's the UK's first female-led and focused podcasting network. And that would never have happened if I hadn't stayed open. And that came about as I was looking for a producer for my show, and met with some friends, and Rosie and I used to work together at YouTube, and Kirsty's a great producer, and hence we went on this journey. We've raised money for it. It's a whole new experience. But I did it because for me, it was aligned to the mission. My mission was I can help women connect to their story inside of them. But actually, that's only half the job done. How do I make sure those stories are heard and seen and monetized as well? I want women to help make money. So the podcast business it's a network. Effectively, we are making our own shows, helping women like you and many others. I think we want to create a long tail of opportunity for women's stories to be heard, because back to my Geena Davis moment, where it was nearly 80-20. YouTube, nearly 80-20 in the early days. Radio, whatever I went to, there was this incredible bias to male stories, content, media, whatever, money as well. And it was shocking when we started to kind of talk about podcasting and my show and things like that. And I started to look into the data, and here it was again. the 80-20. 80% of the current top shows are male-led or male-supported and produced. Then you start to look into the money, right? Where's all the money going? Well, the money's going there. It's the investment, sponsorship, opportunity. It's great. Alistair Campbell and Rory are earning shit tons of millions, etc. And there are the odd anomalies of a Fern Costner, a Davina McCall, or a couple of others, Mel Robbins, etc. Where are all the other women? And I had exactly the same issue when I was at YouTube to go, those stories are brilliant. Why are they not being found and discovered? And so as I started to look more and more into this, I know what it is. Where's the investment? Where's the opportunity? Where's the network? Where's the know-how? Where's the support to do it? And that's what drove us to create it, because it became a completely perfect add-on to what I wanted to do at Glittersphere. Was I can help women to find their story and to be more confident. I'll be the best hype woman any woman needs. But actually, do I need to help her finish that as well? Or not finish it, continue it. And therefore, the next phase will be Glittersphere plus Hera going forward to really kind of make that difference. And so I think that vision and giving myself permission to change my mind and do things differently and navigate fear, because as I say, fear is all about uncertainty, is I get comfortable with uncertainty. So actually I flip it and go, it's okay, I don't know what the answer is, and that's fine because I'll figure it out, or that's a good thing because that's going to leave me open to something else. And that helps on the days where I feel really anxious.
Amazing. And I want to say, what serendipity that you're on my podcast today, as a woman just starting her own podcast off, to then hear your story about what you're doing to support women with that. I'm very much looking forward to hearing and seeing more about that, Nishma.
And also because, Mary, one of the reasons why, you're part of the Glitterati, and I loved your story, love what you're doing, but also one of the reasons why we're building here, we've got big shows and stuff, but I've also, as I said, this long tail, is because I really want to help. You should be getting, I always encourage women to go on podcasts anyway. It's a great way to tell a story. It's a great way to engage. It's a great way to support each other, right? It's supporting someone else's work, which is really important. And so I want to build that network where you're able to support each other as well as look at the commercialization and monetization of it. So, how do we share and create more? But I think it's really important. So what you're doing is brilliant. And I do encourage more women to do it. I say, not everyone has to be a podcaster. It's not going to suit everyone. And it is hard work and it doesn't pay initially, but everyone can be a guest. And that sometimes is our responsibility as women, to turn up for each other. And that's a really great way to do it.
Thank you so much for being here. And this is just all really real nuggets that you're coming out with. I am just going to move us on to talk about authentic intelligence, the other AI, which is so pertinent at the moment with all the talk about AI and artificial intelligence. Absolutely. It feels like the one thing that AI can't replicate is our authenticity. So, you talk about helping women master the other AI. What does this actually mean in practice?
So I did my last few years at Google. I spent a lot of time working on AI and artificial intelligence in terms of how it would be applied in our daily lives, or how it might need to be regulated as well. And there is no doubt, we can see it even more so and accelerating in so many ways, that the world is becoming more automated and more artificial. We've got to be really careful about that. I've talked about it for a long time, about advertising becoming really bland, and everything becomes very pattern and predictable in its way. And the challenge is there's twofold. One is jobs in the future, which we do not know, right? Do not believe anyone who says that they know what's going to happen next, because they simply don't. The only thing you do know is it's going to change, and jobs will become replaced, or will be augmented, or will be enhanced by artificial intelligence. There is no doubt about it. But one of the things you can see is that if the way that we think about future careers and opportunities and jobs or purpose, and what do we do, what's our contribution or worth, so much of it will be automated around what we do. So if CVs to date have been about, I do this, I did that, whatever, I believe that actually you will start to go, how do I be different? How do I stand out against all the machines? Actually, what somebody really wants is my personality, character, and my attitude, more so than actually what I did. And good interviewers will always look for both anyway, but I actually think that becomes a greater value. And actually, as we chart our own lives now going forward in a more artificial and automated world, how do you stand out to be different? Because actually, who you are and the values and the person you are and the role that we all play on this planet becomes really important and needs more examination, analysis, and spotlighting. And that's why I believe in that sense of authenticity, sometimes a word that's kind of overused and hard to kind of really comprehend what it means. But I do believe that authenticity is actually kind of a reflection of your true values and your attitudes and belief of life. How you tap into that authentic intelligence, which is about the determination of how much of it do you share and show. Basically, how do we be more human? If the machines are here and we are in a more machine-led world, artificial intelligence is how do we be more human? Which sounds like a really weird thing to say, but actually human-centered leadership, human-centered behaviors, right? So workplaces that now have leaders who are more human, who show vulnerability, who show empathy, but also, it's back to my lovely Eileen Norton, grit and grace, how do you do that? And so actually the way that we connect now will be through our humanity, always has been. That becomes more important in a world where I go, well, I can't connect to a machine and an AI bot in that same way, but I can connect to you. If I'm a leader, will be very soon, but I have to manage machines and humans. How am I going to do that? I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to be more human than I am machine. So I think it gives you an outsized advantage in the workplace and in your career. I think it's a greater soul for humanity and our society and our soul. And I think it's back on this thing of this reinvention mission that we have in our entire life, which is about being more of me. So authentic intelligence is learning, self-reflection, self-analysis and awareness, but it's more about the telling. Which bits of it do you need to share and show? Because you don't need to share and show all of it. It has to be comfortable. It's got to be relevant. And it is actually strategic. And I think that's the thing is understanding and mastering what we have within us and recognizing how that power gives us more. It's why I believe every single woman can stand on stage and be in a spotlight or tell her story. Amount of women I meet who go, I haven't got anything to say, or I'm like, yes, you have. I could spend 15 minutes with someone and I can find their story, so that's authentic intelligence and it's tapping into that. So the other AI, in my opinion, is as important to be mastered as AI. You should do both. That's really important.
So it's the two interlocking
Like
together.
yin and yang, but I can't have one without the other.
Definitely a yin and yang situation. And I love what you say about we keep reinventing ourselves, but actually what we're doing is we're really becoming more of ourselves each time we do that. We're deepening our understanding of who we are and being more who we are as we progress through our lives. Wonderful. And why do you think then so many brilliant women, because there are so many brilliant women around who are so exceptional, really struggle with being visible?
I think it's a conditioning, like I think it's a shame. In some respects, I wish my business didn't exist, because that would mean that we don't face the problems we face. Where, I meet too many women who are hitting burnout, who have lost their confidence, who have done playing small. And that's a societal pressure or the systemic environment that we live in that doesn't celebrate women in the way they should do, whether it's the way that the way we portray women, the way the roles we give them in the home or at work, the natural things of our kind of caring personality that diminishes as our strength and ability to do business, is there's been too much external noise, which is why I'm so passionate about representation in media, that has conditioned a lot of who we are. And then the actual structures within work or at home that don't allow for those voices to be, it comes back to the simplicity of most little girls being told to go, don't show off, or as a woman and you're a bit noisy in the workplace. Oh,
I was brought up to look nice, be polite and look nice. Yes.
Yeah, be quiet, be polite. Yeah, exactly. Be polite, be quiet, be nice. And the fact is, you can be kind, you can be polite, you can be nice, but it can be done with sequins with a bloody loud hailer. In this sense of going, if we are being taught to be so humble and lacking the confidence, right? If you don't say it out loud, does it happen? Is it real, etc.? And not seeing a fair game has conditioned us. So that's why I often see it. And I think it's a thing that starts from we shed this confidence when we're 5 years old, where we have the boldest of ambition and dream, and puberty, life, the world around us, every bit of media that we consume and tells us endless noise, plus conditioning of the voice in our head, keeps us where we are. It's like, because I'm a bit of a tech geek, it is like rewiring your algorithm. So our current algorithm goes on all past experiences. So when I face with something that quite terrifies me and I think, I can't say that, I can't do it, it's because I'm simply referencing things I've seen and heard. So if we're going to change that, we've got to completely rewire it to do it, which is why it's so intentional as an exercise to go stand out and be visible. And that's why I think women feel that. And I think the fear of judgment is a big thing. And that's judgment from other women as well. I hear more often than not women say, I would just like more female allies. Forget the male allies. I love them. I just want more women allies. And so for me, there's a big part of the movement I want to create is demonstrating that you don't have to win everybody over, right? It's kind of like the 20-20-60, right? You can have 20% of your outliers who I'm never going to change, right? And I don't want to change them. And actually, I don't want to spend any of my effort trying to change them. Somebody else can worry about that bit. The 20% who are happy, supported, advocates, keen, brilliant, love them. They'll always change fast. I can spend some time with the 60% of the swing voters and persuade them that there is a better way. You create momentum, and the natural momentum becomes popular
Yeah.
and natural and intrinsic to support each other and celebrate each other. And that's why I'll say to someone in the street, I think you look wonderful. I'll write a comment on someone's post and say it's good, because when you share it, it's actually contagious. And so I think that contagion is what we have to do.
Absolutely. So the Glittersphere has been born. It's more than just a network. It's actually, about putting sparkle out there and really making women visible. You talk about it being TED Talks meets Studio 54, which I love. That brings up all sorts of connotation. Can you tell us what it feels like to be inside the Glittersphere?
Well, maybe you should share that one. But I think for me, what I hope is, I use that example of TED Talk meets Studio 54 because they are immediately things that we have wired in our brain. We think about TED Talk as being great stories on stage, 20 minutes, succinct, influential and powerful, shift behaviors, shift attitudes, really wonderful bit of storytelling. Studio 54, despite the glamour, inside the glamour and sequence, the obvious bit, was also a home. If you take it, it's great, it was hedonistic, but it was a home at the belief that anything is possible. And that's why I wanted it. So inside the sphere, I want it to be an environment where women do feel supported and do support each other, that we start to work together as a training ground to be able to deliver those TED Talks. But the Studio 54 brings a bit of glamour and sparkle and fun and a sense of possibility. It doesn't matter who you are and what you do, anything is possible. And I think we have to believe that you can turn up with an idea, you can turn up with a talk, you can turn up as you are, or the problem, and it's okay. And the positive environment, because I didn't want the Glittersphere to be somewhere where we came to moan or complain, wanted it to be a nurturing and uplifting and positive environment. That's what I want the feeling inside the Glittersphere to be. And we're only just getting started and we're shaping it. And I've got a whole load of in-person events in September, which I'm really excited about, because I think the Glittersphere comes to life where that feeling that I describe, I hope people will actually feel in person.
Booked in for a couple of those actually, Nishma. I also have had some one-to-ones with some of the people that I've met. And what I do get a sense of is they're all women who are really on a mission themselves. You're providing this space for us all to support each other and to help us keep stepping up and making a difference. You think about the tipping point of that, how phenomenal that could be.
That's what I'm excited about. That is what drives me. The tipping point of it's never a me-led mission. I don't believe in that. I'm creating the container and the platform and the stage, because that's what happens when you bring everyone together and they do their bit.
And it certainly feels consistently supportive as well, which is lovely. So some great women on there. And if anyone hasn't explored the Glittersphere, I encourage you to do so, particularly if you're someone who wants to make a big difference in the world. So, you talk about women have got to get themselves out there. They've got to get on the stage, find their voices. You've stood on over 100 global stages, which is also phenomenal. How did you find your voice, and how are you going to help other women? How can you support them
First
to
of
do
all,
it?
I got on those stages because I enjoyed it, and I didn't at first, I hated it at first, but I wanted to enjoy it. I wanted to do it. I'm one of these people that once I set my mind to something, I really want to try and master it. And I always say to people, the best way to do this is you just have to you've got to start and you've got to keep doing it. You've got to keep doing it. Always ask for feedback, always asked for kind of like, how do people respond? And that now I'm much better. I have much strategic ways of either filming and listening and really kind of being quite forensic about improving my performance. But I think the most important thing is if when you go with an attitude of going, I'm going to get out and say something with the intention of helping somebody else, it's a mindset of shifting to service rather than just a loud hailer, right? It's not getting out to go, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's about getting out to go, I'm going to tell you something that I think will hopefully help somebody. And that mindset shift encourages you to get up and perform and be a better storyteller. And I think the things I want to do within the community and to help women, and what I do already when I do that, is I start with a story. I start with time of just going, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, where's the love for it? What is it? And then it's like shaping it, because actually the most important thing is when you step onto stage is that you are more you, right? So who do you want to be? So when I step on and I step on stage with sequins and I play music when I do my workshops, and people are always a bit like, what? And I go, I want everyone to get up and dance. And I had a room full of women in insurance at 9 a.m. in the city, up dancing to Shaka Khan. It was a bit of a shock to all of them, but they loved it. And that's I've chosen to do that. It's taken me a long time to get to that's what my flavor is. But I think that's where it unlocks something really special. But it has to start with the motivation and the reason, and then the right tools and guidance to guide you through your evolution. There's so many things to learn and be perfected. I'm part of a community to be a better speaker. Right? My job is not to, I want to be even better than I can be, and want to be the best I can be. And actually what I can learn, I can share with others. So I think I'm a natural continuous learner, and I encourage other people to do that. But I think it's practice. And so within the Glittersphere, we're going to have this thing called Niche Talks. It starts in late September, which will be effectively like our TED Talk stage within that. And that's your training ground. And we will help each other to be brilliant.
And I really get a sense of embrace the fear, act despite the fear, do what you need to do to learn and to grow. And you too can develop that love of presenting. Because I know lots of people who the whole idea of presenting is
it makes them
like,
feel terribly. Yeah, I know. And I'm excited to help people step over that.
Fantastic. So much that you've shared with us today. So many golden nuggets in it, or golden sparkles, shall we say. What's one thing you wish every woman knew about building influence?
That's a really good question. I would say that actually it's not about applause, it's about alignment. So I think having influence isn't about chasing applause. It's about chasing alignment. That the more you influence, the more you find the alignment that then creates acceleration. And I think when you're thinking about your influence, is think about what it attracts and therefore facilitates, rather than the metrics of applause and likes.
Yes. And I get a sense of, which is maybe why I've become so obsessed with my podcast, because it feels very aligned with me. But there's something about the alignment is aligning with your values and what's important to you and what's the difference you want to make. Being more aligned with that rather than being worried about, will people like this, or are people going to give me applause?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, as soon as you release yourself of that, everything changes. And I think that's why I focus on alignment, not audience.
And for listeners who are quietly brilliant but unsure how to step forward, what's the first step that they could take in beginning to own their own story?
Well, obviously, I was going to say join the Glittersphere without a doubt. I actually think when you start to think about your own story, is you do have to start with the why. Like, why do you want to tell your story, but it's like, what is it that you want to do, and then come to your story. So for me, it was, I knew I wanted to create this sense of visibility and equality or fairness for others. And therefore, when I think about my story, it was like, what are the relevant parts of my story that I need to share and tell? Well, that is being vulnerable. It is, except, going, it's not perfect, and I'm okay with that. And that will give other people confidence and relatability, whatever. For somebody else, it might be going, I want to help women overcome, having been a victim. This is very deep, but having been a victim of, someone had been a victim of domestic abuse, someone I'm working with. And she said, actually, I just want other women to know that there are means and ways of out of it. And there is recovery at the other end of it. So I said to her, what aspect of your story do you want to share? Because you could do the obvious and you just tell that. She said, no, I want to talk about recovery. Just want to talk about recovery. So then we work on her story about recovery, because that's what she's focused on because of the acceleration it goes. I think sometimes you've got to figure out what it is, why you want to do it. Sometimes because you want to sell the thing that you created, creative business. I'm working with a woman who's got a handbag business, which is a beautiful handbag that she has. And she's like, how do I do my founder story in this? And I was like, well, why did you make the bags? And she's like, oh. And when you think about making the bags, what makes you think about why you make the bags? She's, well, I used to love these Lulu Guinness bags. I used to see when I was younger. And I was like, right, great. There's your story. What inspired you? And that's where it comes from.
So it's the why, it's what gives you energy. So the things that you've loved in your past and maybe present, and all the things that drive you and motivate you forward. That's where you'll find your story. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I do need to check the name of your dog who joined us.
It was Millie.
Millie. Well, it was lovely that Millie joined us as well. Thank you, Nishma.
Thank you. Lovely to see you, Mary.
Lovely to see you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Before we wrap up, I want to share something with you. Do you ever feel like your confidence isn't really the issue, but wish you could strengthen your ability to deal with things that keep chipping away at it? The bias, the double standards, the pressure to prove yourself, to name just a few. That's exactly why I created Exploding the Confidence Myth, a 3-month programme for women leaders who are ready to change that story. It combines one-to-one coaching, group coaching, and a powerful in-person workshop. The next programme starts at the beginning of November, with the workshop taking place on the 7th of November at the Connaught Rooms in Holborn, London. Past participants have described it as validating, supportive and stretching. They've become more visible, raised their value, increased their financial return and broken through patterns that have held them back. But perhaps, most importantly, they've gained a deeper sense of okayness with who they are, recognising they already have something valuable to offer. If this resonates with you or you know someone who would benefit, you'll find all the details in the show notes. I'd love you to join us. Thank you so much for listening to the She Leads Collective podcast. If this episode resonated with you, follow the show or share it with a friend and leave a quick review below. Or leave us a comment. Change happens through conversation, so let's keep this one going. Listen out for the next episode and join me as we keep lifting the lid on the stories that matter. Take care and keep leading with heart.